Okay, so here we go. Back to languages and linguistics. I want to do a little treatise, as it were, on why I'm not a fan of Steve Kaufman's, as he does his, why he's not a fan of Pimsleur, why he's not a fan of TPR, why he's not a fan of the autolingual method, why he's not a fan of Michel Thomas, why he's not a fan of Paul Noble. All those. Main reason is that he wants to sell his product. And that's why he's not a fan. If he tells you that he's a fan of those guys, then he'd be, you know, stopping what he wants to do, which is make money from his product, which he mentions every other line or two. Can't seemingly splice together 3 or 4 clauses without mentioning it and telling you about how great it works for him. Now, so why do I have a problem not being a fan? There are some sycophants of his. Yes, I know. I get a lot of them. They write a lot of hate stuff. And of course, they don't have real names. They don't have real photos because they're cowards. So Steve attracts a lot of cowards. So if you're a coward, maybe his methods will work very well for you. Uh, what is apparent is that he likes to call himself a linguist, and he is not a linguist. And I'm going to cover this one more time. He is not a linguist because a linguist can analyze a language. Steve couldn't analyze a language if his life or his grandchildren's lives depended upon the fact. He cannot understand or begin to deal with an unscripted language, which a real linguist, especially field linguists, can do. He doesn't have the tools, he doesn't have the skills. And whether you people care about it, Steve's coward sycophants, or not, has nothing to do with the fact that that's what a linguist means in academic sense. Just like that's what a surgeon means, operates. It doesn't mean someone who's a medicine man, a shaman, which is what he is. Okay, and number say he's not a linguist. He's not a real linguist. He can't analyze languages. Yeah, don't call yourself a linguist if that's not what you do. Semantically, I guess I don't know if he understands that or not. Number two, he has no proof or validations of what he says. He just goes on his what he says, that he's learned 12 languages and he's done it this way. Well, here's the analogy. There are some great fighters who've been able to win a lot. That's a freak thing. That doesn't mean that they have a method that's worth anything. The people who do have a method turn out more than one champion. And then, for example, in K1, that would be Holland. The Netherlands produces all the great fighters. Why? Because it's their methods, and especially places like Golden Glory. So that's a little thing. And how about Mike Tyson? Mike Tyson hasn't created anybody as a fighter. However, the guy that trained him, Cus D'Amato, had trained several people who became uh, great champions. People that were even further out of their weight class, like Floyd Patterson. But anyway, so that's an analogy right there about the aspect. So he talks about this method, but he doesn't have any. He has no studies, no credentials behind it. He hasn't proved any of it. He wants to disavow the fact that TPR has the strongest actual scientific studies behind it. Steve's one of those guys who likes to say things about statistics when he can use it to his favor, but then try to dismiss and disavow and denigrate the whole field of science. He's also an anti-intellectual in a lot of ways. He doesn't like education. Of course, he doesn't have a degree in education. Of course, he's not a real professor. Of course, he hasn't published anything. Of course, he hasn't proven why. He goes off his things that doesn't work. Steve has a shallow understanding of what education involves, especially in places like the United States of America, where they must take everyone. That means the mentally retarded, the emotionally damaged, behavior problems. It has this huge gamut, and it has to deal with them all. Now, when you start eliminating people left and right, you can start having better results. It's basically a daycare that costs less than a daycare in the United States. That's one aspect of education. Now, he and Laoshu like to talk about education, but they don't seem to be doing anything to change it other than try to sell Steve his product, which is not working. And Steve, if your product and your ideas are so good, why are no government agencies using them then? because they have to produce results. So it's funny they're not going with you, Steve, whatsoever. In fact, your stuff is too slow. Looking at what some of the people have sent me, saying that you talk about how it takes 2 or 3 years to get up to a certain level, and you don't like talking on Pimsleur because it pushes you and you don't like to respond. Oh, gee, sounds like a sort of an ego defense there on your behalf. So you got no credible thing. Pimsleur was good. He's the guy who really started what all these other people are using with spaced recall segments, SRS or whatever. He called it graduated intervals, which is was very good. Plus, he died before he implemented. He had not designed that for a distance learning thing, which is what it's used for now. It was actually for the classroom. And what has Steve done? Steve has produced a product, and he tries to sell that. He gets upset when people come on and talk about other things and talk about other methods, because he, of course, immediately, the first thing he'll say, well, it doesn't work for me, and I blah blah, and I do this, and and of course it's all about your money. And I'm going to go back to about you and Benny, because both you and Benny are after money. That's the only thing. You have an agenda. The only reason you guys talk about your two things is because you have an agenda. Benny, I won't get into Benny. I won't skip that right now. That's for later. But so you haven't proven anything academically, and yes, that's what counts, Steve, not your little linguophile sort of idea. So I have a problem with it. You refuse to be academic. You refuse to actually put studies behind it. If you really want to prove yourself, you're going to put your method with a control group against another method with control groups. But you're not going to do that, Steve, because you can't. You don't know how. I don't think you can begin to understand that's what it takes to be valid in the real world out there, which you don't want to be. TPR has proven it. Asher's proven it. You, of course, have proven that you don't understand what Krashen was saying. Your idea of comprehensible input is completely not what he said whatsoever. And you also disavow the whole thing that he and Terrell said about using TPR. You've also, there's plenty of other methods that I could bring in, but that's not what I'm going to talk about now. I'm just going to talk about why I'm not a fan of Steve. I'm not a fan of Steve because he's an anti-intellectual. He calls himself a linguist. He is not. He says that his method is really great, but he has not proven it against any other methods. He also talks as if there is only what he says has value, or as if he's an authority. He's not published. He doesn't have credentials. And yes, you have to have those. You have no clout. Look, Chomsky's not going to you for any sort of information. There's another guy, I've heard you, that you don't understand what he's talking about. So basically, I'm not a fan of yours, Steve, because you haven't produced anything that works in large ways. The FSI, the DLI model has worked very well. That's been proven. TPR has worked, and it's been proven. Pimsleur's method has been proven to work. Michelle Thomas' method has proven to work. Noble, which is using basically Thomas's method, is proven to work. And several others, and you haven't even looked at the accelerated learning type of people, which there is not as many different places to go for that, but there are people. And the right brain approach, you're so left brain, and it's overwhelming that you think that you can proffer your idea of how to learn languages is superior to other people's because you haven't proven it. Okay, so that's the thing. That's why I'm not a fan of yours, Steve. You failed to respond to me. You failed to take the challenge of actually learning an unscripted language. You failed to prove to me that you actually can know what you're talking about and you have credentials, and you've written in a peer-reviewed journal. All that. That's what means something out here, not YouTube sycophant cowards that you attract, like Mr. 12,000 or all these crappy pseudonyms that they come up with. So that's why I'm not a fan of yours, Steve, and I'll get back to you and Benny about how from my first video of giving you two a chance to talk about something, and you ran like the day is long, which is normal. But okay, so that's to recap again, because I know a lot of people have this inability to listen to what I'm saying. Steve says he's a linguist. He's not. He can't analyze languages. He's failed to try to learn an unscripted language. And I'm going to get at another thing, he doesn't know about being an insider, outsider, emic, and etic, which is huge deal. And he has also not proven, like I've said over and over again, and he has not shown that what he's doing can apply in settings that would be necessary to actually improve learning. He's not an educator. He hasn't shown any sort of credentials like that. He hasn't proffered anything but his own business model. So there you go. Kaufman from the German. Exactly what he is. Anyway, that's what's going to cover it for right now. By the way, again, I tell you people, you cannot post on here if you do not have a real name and you do not have a real photo. If you're trolling me, I will ban you in 1 second. I'm not even going to deal with it. And you cowards? You think you're writing comments that mean something? Please, So there it is.